My mother-in-law whispered, "He only married you out of pity." So I smiled and passed her the prenup signed by her son. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like it, and comment where you're watching from. The air in our Atlanta home was always different when Grace was coming to visit. It was as if the oxygen molecules themselves were holding their breath, bracing for the subtle chill that followed her through the front door. Jack, my dear, sweet, perpetually oblivious Jack, never seemed to notice. To him, the scent of his mother's expensive perfume was just a part of the tapestry of his life, a familiar note in the symphony of his existence. To me, it smelled of judgment, a cloying floral scent that sought to suffocate everything I was or everything I wasn't in her eyes. Tonight was no different. It was our second wedding anniversary dinner, a celebration that Grace had insisted on hosting at our house, a classic power move disguised as a loving gesture. "Oh, it's no trouble at all, darling," she had purred over the phone to Jack. "I'll handle everything, you two just relax." Of course, handling everything meant she would bring her own caterer, her own wine, and her own impossibly high standards, turning my home into a stage for her performance as the matriarch. My role, as always, was to be the silent, smiling accessory, the girl from the wrong side of the tracks who had somehow managed to snag the city's golden boy. I adjusted the sleeve of my silk dress, a deep emerald green that Jack had said brought out the fire in my eyes. I had bought it specifically for tonight, a small piece of armor. As I looked at my reflection in the grand hallway mirror, the one Grace had gifted us as a housewarming present, and which I was sure she thought was far too elegant for my taste, I saw the ghost of the girl I used to be. A girl who worked 2 jobs to put herself through college, who saw the world not as a series of entitlements, but as a mountain to be climbed, one grueling step at a time. That girl would have been intimidated by Grace. But I wasn't that girl anymore. 2 years of marriage to Jack, and 5 years of enduring his mother, had taught me a different kind of resilience. It wasn't about fighting back with fire, but with ice. You see, the story Grace had written for me in her mind was a simple one. I was the charity case. The daughter of a mechanic and a schoolteacher, a scholarship kid who had met her son at a university fundraiser where I was working as a waitress. She saw my background not as a testament to my strength, but as a stain of my unworthiness. In her world, people like me didn't marry people like Jack. We served them canapés. The fact that Jack had fallen deeply, irrevocably in love with me was an inconvenient truth she chose to reinterpret. To her, it couldn't be love. It had to be pity, a momentary lapse in his otherwise impeccable judgment. The doorbell chimed, a melodic sound that sent a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. "I'll get it," Jack called out, his voice full of a genuine excitement that was both endearing and, in this context, painfully naive. He bounded down the stairs, his smile wide and open, a perfect reflection of his heart. He was a good man, the best I had ever known. And it was that goodness that Grace used as a weapon against me, framing it as a weakness, a soft-heartedness that had led him to rescue me. I took a deep breath, straightened my spine, and walked towards the foyer, a practiced, serene smile on my lips. There she was. Grace stood framed in the doorway, a vision in cream-colored cashmere and pearls. Her silver hair was perfectly coiffed, her makeup immaculate. She looked less like a woman and more like a monument to old money. "Isabella, darling," she said, her voice smooth as glass as she offered me her cheek for a kiss. The air around her was cold. "You look lovely. That color is very bold." It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation, a subtle critique. In her world, boldness was vulgarity. "Grace, it's so good to see you. Thank you for arranging all of this," I replied, my voice equally smooth. I had learned to play her game, to speak the language of polite insincerity. The caterers were already in the kitchen, their quiet efficiency a stark contrast to the simmering tension in the dining room. The table was set for 3, a masterpiece of crystal and silver that gleamed under the soft light of the chandelier. It was my dining room, my table, my crystal, yet it felt entirely like her territory. She glided around the room, making a minute adjustment to a fork, straightening a wine glass that was already perfectly aligned. She was marking her space, reminding me that even in my own home, I was a guest in her world. Dinner began, as it always did, with a monologue from Grace about her recent charity gala, the incompetence of the mayor, and the rising price of everything, which she somehow managed to frame as a personal affront. Jack listened attentively, interjecting with thoughtful comments, ever the dutiful son. I ate my sea base, which was exquisite, and sipped my wine, a crisp Sancerre she had selected, of course. I remained a quiet observer, a ghost at my own anniversary feast. "So Jack tells me your little online business is doing well," Grace said, turning her piercing blue eyes on me. She called it my little business, the company I had built from the ground up, the one that was now a leader in sustainable fashion, employing 23 people, the one that was projected to do 8 figures in revenue this year. "It's going very well, thank you," I said, keeping my tone light. "That's wonderful, dear. It's so important to have a hobby, to keep oneself busy." A hobby. The word was a perfectly polished dagger, and she slid it between my ribs with a smile. She was diminishing me, reducing my life's work to a pastime, a distraction for the pitiful little wife. Jack, bless his heart, tried to defend me. "Mom, it's more than a hobby. Isabella is a CEO. She was featured in Forbes last month." Grace waved a dismissive hand, the diamonds on her wrist catching the light. "Oh, I know, darling. I'm just saying it's lovely that you're able to do something you enjoy, Isabella, especially since you didn't have to worry about, well, the usual pressures." The unspoken words hung in the air, the pressure of actually needing to earn a living because my son takes care of you. This was her method. She never attacked me directly, not in front of Jack. It was always through insinuation, through the careful curation of words that made me feel small, like an imposter. For years I had let it sting. I had gone to bed with tears in my eyes, questioning my own worth, wondering if she was right. But something had shifted in me over the past year. My success had forged a new kind of confidence, a quiet strength that she couldn't touch. I had built something that was entirely mine, something that had nothing to do with the prestigious family I had married into. As the main course was cleared and dessert was served, a deconstructed tiramisu that was as beautiful as it was pretentious, Jack's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, a frown creasing his brow. "I'm so sorry, it's the office. There's an urgent issue with the Hong Kong servers. I have to take this. I'll be right back." He leaned in and kissed my cheek, his lips warm against my skin. "Don't let her bully you," he whispered, so low that only I could hear. It was a small acknowledgement, a sign that he wasn't entirely blind, but his aversion to direct conflict with his mother meant he would never be my champion in this fight. This was a battle I had to win on my own. He disappeared into his study, and suddenly the vast dining room felt small and suffocating. The air thickened. It was just me and Grace, the predator and her perceived prey. She set her fork down, her eyes locking onto mine. The pretense of politeness vanished, leaving behind a cold, hard cruelty. The silence stretched, a taut wire of animosity. I refused to be the first to speak. I met her gaze, holding it, refusing to flinch. Finally, she leaned forward slightly, a conspiratorial glint in her eye. She lowered her voice to a soft, venomous whisper, a sound meant to slither directly into my soul. "You know," she began, her voice a silken thread of poison, "I've never understood it. Why he chose you." I remained silent, my heart a steady, rhythmic drum against my ribs. I had prepared for this moment for 2 years. She continued, a faint, cruel smile playing on her lips. But then I realized it. He's always had a soft spot for wounded things. Stray dogs, broken birds. You. She paused, letting the insult land. He only married you out of pity. There it was. The words she had been wanting to say for years, the core of her belief, the foundation of her disdain. Pity. Not love, not passion, not respect. Pity. It was the ugliest, most dismissive word in her arsenal, and she had just handed it to me. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. The old Isabella, the girl who served canapés and dreamed of a better life, would have crumbled. She would have cried. She would have protested, her voice trembling with a futile, desperate need to be believed. But I simply held her gaze. And then, I did something she did not expect. I smiled. It wasn't a triumphant, gloating smile. It was a calm, serene, almost gentle smile. A smile of absolution. It was the smile of someone who knew a truth that she could not even begin to comprehend. The look of utter confusion that flickered across her face was more satisfying than any angry retort could ever have been. My lack of a reaction, my refusal to take the bait, had completely disarmed her. She had expected tears. She was met with tranquility. I slowly placed my napkin on the table, the linen crisp and white. "Grace," I said, my voice even and clear, the sound cutting through the thick tension. "There's something I think you should see." I pushed my chair back and stood up, my movements deliberate and unhurried. I walked over to the mahogany sideboard at the edge of the room. From the top drawer, I retrieved a thick, leather-bound portfolio. My fingers didn't tremble. My breath was steady. I walked back to the table, the portfolio held in my hand, and stood beside her. She watched me, her eyes narrowed with suspicion, her carefully constructed composure beginning to fray. "What is this?" she asked, her voice sharp. I didn't answer immediately. I opened the portfolio and took out a sheaf of papers, bound together with a simple clip. I placed them on the table in front of her, next to her half-eaten dessert. The top page was a cover sheet, with a simple, elegant title. Prenuptial Agreement between Isabella Reed and Jackson. Preston III. Her eyes scanned the title, and then she looked up at me, a flicker of something. Was it triumph? In her gaze. "A prenup," she scoffed softly, as if this confirmed all her suspicions. How sensible of Jack. I told him he needed to protect the family assets from... She let the sentence hang, the insult implied. From people like you. My smile widened slightly. "Oh, he was very sensible, Grace. But you seem to have misunderstood." I gently tapped my finger on the cover page. "Read it." Her gaze dropped back to the page. She flipped past the cover sheet to the first article. Her perfectly manicured finger traced the lines of text, her brow furrowing in concentration. I watched as the color began to drain from her face. I knew the exact clauses she was reading. I had helped draft them. I knew the part that detailed my assets going into the marriage, the small but growing portfolio from my first startup, which I had sold a year before meeting Jack. I knew the part that outlined the projected valuation of my new company, and the clause that stipulated that all shares and profits from said company would remain my sole and separate property, untouched and untouchable. And then I watched her reach the most important part, the part that Jack himself had insisted on, a testament to the man he was, a man his mother had never truly seen. Article 4. Separation of Familial Assets. Section 4. 1. In recognition of the significant familial wealth and assets held by Jackson Preston III, and in the interest of ensuring the marriage is founded upon mutual love and respect rather than financial incentive, Isabella Reed hereby waives any and all claim to any current or future Preston family inheritance, trust funds, properties, or assets in the event of a marital dissolution. Her breath hitched. This was the part she would have expected, the part that protected her world, but it was the next section that was the true masterpiece. Section 4.2. In recognition of Isabella Reed's waiver of claims, and in acknowledgement of the potential social and professional sacrifices made by entering into the Preston family, Jackson Preston III agrees that, should the marriage be dissolved for any reason, a penalty clause shall be enacted. The clause stipulates that Jackson Preston III will forfeit a 35% share of his personal trust, to be transferred not to Isabella Reed, but to a charitable foundation of her choosing, in her name. This is to ensure that the dissolution of the marriage does not become a tool for familial or social pressure against Isabella Reed. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief and horror. The mask of aristocratic composure had shattered, revealing the raw, ugly shock beneath. She was staring at a legal document that not only insulated me from her money, but made me the gatekeeper of a significant portion of it in the event of a divorce. Jack had, in essence, created a financial nuclear deterrent against his own family. He had protected me in a way I hadn't even thought possible. But that wasn't the final blow. I slowly turned another page for her, my movements graceful. My finger landed on a specific signature line at the very end of the document. It was Jack's signature, bold and confident. Dated 1 week before our wedding, and next to it, on the line for the witness, was another signature. It belonged to Walter Finch, the Preston family's oldest and most trusted legal counsel, the man who had been Grace's lawyer for 40 years. She looked from the paper to my face, her mouth slightly agape. She saw no fear in my eyes, no desperation, only a quiet, unshakable certainty. She had spent years believing I was a cunning gold digger who had trapped her son. The truth was staring her in the face. I had legally and contractually walled myself off from her fortune. More than that, her own son had built the wall with me, and her most trusted advisor had been the one to sign off on the blueprints. The entire foundation of her narrative, the carefully constructed story of the pitiful girl and the compassionate prince, had just been demolished. "He didn't marry me out of pity, Grace," I said softly, my voice devoid of malice. It was a simple statement of fact. "He married me because he loves me, and he signed this," I tapped the document one last time, "because he knew that you would never believe it." At that moment, Jack walked back into the room, a cheerful smile on his face. "Sorry about that. The server is back online. Everything okay?" He looked from my calm expression to his mother's ashen face, to the legal document sitting on the table between them. His smile faltered, replaced by a look of understanding and a deep, weary sadness. He knew exactly what had happened. He walked over to me, wrapped his arm around my waist, and kissed the top of my head. He didn't need to ask. He looked at his mother, his gaze firm. "Mom," he said, his voice quiet but unyielding, "I think it's time for you to go." Grace stood up, her movements stiff and robotic. She couldn't look at me. She couldn't even look at her son. Her empire of assumptions had crumbled, leaving her exposed and powerless. Without another word, she gathered her purse and swept out of the room, the scent of her perfume a fading ghost in her wake. The front door clicked shut, and in the ensuing silence, I leaned my head against Jack's shoulder, the tension finally seeping out of my body. He held me tightly. "I'm sorry, Izzy," he murmured into my hair. "I'm so sorry you had to do that." I looked up at him, at the love and regret in his eyes. "I'm not," I said, and I meant it. I took the prenup from the table, its pages feeling less like a legal contract and more like a declaration of independence. Tonight wasn't about her, Jack. It was about me. It was about me finally believing that I deserved to be in this house, at this table, with you. Not because of a document, but because of who I am. He smiled, a genuine, relieved smile that reached his eyes. "I've known that since the day I met you." That night, for the first time, the house felt truly ours. The air was clear and still, free from the suffocating chill of judgment. I had walked into that dinner as Isabella, Jack's wife. I walked out of it as Isabella, the architect of my own life, a woman whose worth was not up for negotiation, And in the quiet strength of that knowledge, I had found the one thing Grace's money could never buy: peace. The silence Grace left behind was a physical presence in the room. It wasn't empty. It was heavy, filled with the unspoken words of years, with the ghost of a battle that had just reached its brutal, quiet conclusion. Jack held me for a long time, his chin resting on my head. We didn't speak. We just breathed together, the rise and fall of our chests a steady rhythm in the aftermath. The meticulously catered dessert sat untouched on the table, a sweet, deconstructed relic of a war zone. Finally, he loosened his embrace and looked down at me, his eyes searching mine. "Are you really okay?" he asked, his voice raw. I nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. "I am. But are you?" I asked, gently touching his cheek. "That's your mother, Jack. No matter what she is, no matter what she's done, that was your mother you asked to leave." A shadow of pain crossed his features. "She stopped being just my mother a long time ago when it came to you, Izzy. She became something else, a critic, a judge. Tonight I saw it for what it was. It wasn't about protecting me. It was about controlling me and hurting you." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I just hate that you had the prenup ready, that you've been carrying this, waiting for the moment you'd need it." I led him from the cold formality of the dining room to the warmth of our living room, curling up on the sofa we had chosen together. I picked up the leather portfolio from the coffee table where I'd left it. "I didn't see it as a weapon, Jack," I explained, my voice soft. "Not at first. Walter, your family's lawyer, he told me something when we signed it. He said, 'Mrs. Preston, some documents are for a court of law and others are for the court of opinion. I have a feeling this one is for the latter.'" I looked at Jack, wanting him to understand. It was my proof, my evidence that our marriage wasn't a transaction. I think for a long time, a part of me needed to believe Grace could change, that one day she would see me, see us, for what we are. I kept it in case I ever needed to show her the truth without raising my voice. "And tonight, she finally gave you no choice," he finished for me, his expression grim. "She gave me no choice," I agreed. "She pushed me into the one corner where the only thing that could defend me was the truth in black and white." That night marked a profound shift in our marriage. It was as if a pane of frosted glass between us had been shattered. Jack had always loved me, I never doubted that. But he had been raised in a world of unspoken rules and familial obligations, taught to keep the peace, especially with his mother. By forcing the confrontation, I had freed him as much as I had freed myself. He no longer had to walk the tightrope between the two most important women in his life. The line had been drawn, and he had unequivocally chosen his side. Our side. The days that followed were quiet, eerily so. Grace did not call. Not to apologize, not to rage, not to explain. Her silence was a cold front moving in, a promise of a long winter. Jack's father, a man who generally remained a passive observer in his wife's social machinations, sent Jack a terse one-line email. "Your mother is very upset. You should fix it." Jack showed it to me, his jaw tight. "Fix it," he repeated, the words tasting like ash. As if I'm the one who broke it. He typed a simple reply. "There is nothing to fix. My wife is my priority." He hit send before he could second-guess himself. It was another small act of revolution. The real test, I knew, would come with the holidays. Thanksgiving at the Preston family estate was an institution, a grand affair for 50 of Atlanta's elite. It was Grace's kingdom, and she was its undisputed queen. For weeks we debated whether to go. Attending felt like surrender, but not attending felt like a declaration of war that would ripple through the entire family. "We go," I finally said one evening, about a week before the event. Jack looked at me, surprised. "But we go on our terms. We don't stay at the house. We'll book a suite at the Four Seasons. We arrive an hour before dinner, and we leave right after dessert. We are a united front. We are not there to be judged or to beg for forgiveness. We are there because we are part of this family, whether Grace likes it or not. My confidence buoyed him. He made the arrangements, his voice firm on the phone with his father. For the first time, he was setting boundaries with them, and while it was difficult, I could see a new strength settling in his shoulders. Arriving at the estate felt like walking onto a movie set. The long, winding driveway, the perfectly manicured lawns, the imposing Georgian mansion aglow with warm light. In the past, my heart would have been pounding with anxiety, my hands clammy. This time, as Jack's hand held mine, I felt a steady calm. My emerald green dress from our anniversary dinner had been my armor. Tonight, my armor was my husband's hand in mine. Grace was holding court in the grand living room when we entered. She saw us, and for a fraction of a second, her practiced hostess smile faltered. A flicker of cold fury passed through her eyes before being replaced by an icy indifference. She didn't approach us. She turned her back ever so slightly and engaged the person next to her in animated conversation. It was a deliberate, public snub. Years ago, this would have crushed me. I would have felt the stares of every cousin, aunt, and family friend, their whispers dissecting my very presence. But now I saw it for what it was, the desperate act of a queen who had lost her power over a key part of her kingdom. She couldn't hurt me with whispers of pity anymore, so she was resorting to the silent treatment. Jack steered me towards his favorite cousin, Sarah, who greeted us with a warm, genuine hug. "I'm glad you came," she whispered to me. "Things have been tense. I heard there was some kind of contract. Good for you." The family gossip mill had clearly been working overtime, but it seemed the narrative wasn't entirely in Grace's favor. Power respects power, and my quiet legal maneuver had earned me a different kind of status. I was no longer the pitiful stray. I was the woman who had checkmated the queen. Dinner was a masterclass in passive aggression. We were seated at the far end of the long banquet-style table, as far from Grace as possible. She lorded over the meal, telling stories and laughing, pointedly excluding us from her line of sight. But her performance was strained. The joy didn't reach her eyes. She kept glancing our way when she thought we weren't looking. We ate, we made pleasant conversation with those around us, and we held our heads high. Jack was attentive and loving, placing his hand on my back, laughing at my jokes. We were an island of two, serene and untouchable. We weren't there to fight. We were there to exist, to take up our space, to be happy in her presence. It was a far more effective strategy than any argument. It showed her that our happiness was not contingent on her approval. As dessert was served, I saw Grace speaking with her sister, her aunt, gesturing subtly in our direction. I could almost hear the words, the poisoned narrative she was surely spinning. But it didn't matter. The truth was our shield. We left exactly as planned. As we stood to say our goodbyes, making a general announcement to the room, there was a brief, awkward silence. Jack walked over to his father and shook his hand. I stood beside him, offering a polite smile. Then, Jack turned to his mother. "Good night, Mother," he said, his voice neutral. Grace looked at him, then at me. Her face was a mask of cold fury. She wanted me to cower. She wanted me to apologize. She wanted me to break. I simply met her gaze, held it for a beat, and gave her a small, polite nod. As we walked out of the grand doors and into the crisp November air, I felt a profound sense of release. We hadn't won a battle. We had simply survived the war and discovered it no longer had the power to harm us. Back in our hotel suite, with the glittering lights of the Atlanta skyline spread out before us, Jack opened a bottle of champagne. "To us," he said, handing me a glass, "and to new traditions." I clinked my glass against his. "I have some news," I said, a smile I couldn't contain spreading across my face. "I wasn't sure when to tell you, with everything going on." He put his glass down, his full attention on me. "What is it?" "My company," I said, my heart swelling with pride. We just signed the partnership deal with that sustainable textile manufacturer in Europe, the one I've been working on for 6 months. It's going to double our production and our workforce. We're not a little business anymore, Jack. We're going global. The look of pure, unadulterated pride on his face was my true victory. He pulled me into his arms and spun me around, his laughter echoing in the room. It was a joy so pure and real, it eclipsed all the manufactured drama of the night. "That's my CEO," he said, kissing me deeply. "My brilliant, incredible wife." In that moment, I realized the prenup had never really been about the money, or the clauses, or the signatures. It was a catalyst. It was the tool I had used to dismantle a false narrative. The real power wasn't in the document, it was in me. It was in the company I had built, the life I had forged, and the partnership I had chosen. Grace had tried to humiliate me by casting me as a character in her story. But I had taken the pen from her hand and written a new one, my own story. And in this one, I was no one's charity case. I was the one holding the crown.